This is the book Winchee, Mission Stories of Colin and Melva Winch by S Ross Goldstone. The true adventures of missionary pilots and nurses in the South Pacific, as retold to the children of Watertown SDA Church. I'm your storyteller, Austin Bacchus. Let's go.
We're going to continue the chapter, Life on a Mission Station. The 650-mile-long Fly River is one of Papua New Guinea's longest rivers, rising in the Victor Emmanuel Mountains on the Erie and Jaya border and flowing through floodplains to the Gulf of Papua. In its upper course, it flows through narrow gorges, then through swampy grasslands, but by the time it reaches the sea, its delta is 32 miles wide. In this delta can be seen many low-lying islands, a number of which are inhabited. The main town of the area is Drau, situated on a small island of the same name. To reach the Fly River, Colin had to sail the Diari II, a 28-foot mission vessel based at Oriomo, down the Oriomo River to Drau, a trip that took a little longer than 3 hours. After picking up supplies, he sailed the open sea of the Papuan Gulf, heading for the north bank of the Fly River. Sailing in the Papuan Gulf with its delta waterways and 30-foot tides was a hazard in itself due to the ever-shifting tidal mudflats. This navigational nightmare necessitated a constant watch lest the ship run aground. The crew was made up of the national captain, Duba, and 3 or 4 volunteer crewmen who were happy to work for the pleasure of a seagoing holiday. On one such trip, Colin was at the wheel and Duba was casting the lead line into the muddy, opaque water from the bow of the ship, calling out the depth. 2 fathoms tabada! 1.5 fathoms tabada! 1 fathom tabada! Then whoom! They were firmly aground on the sand. The crew ran from side to side, rocking the boat in unison, while the captain put the engine on full throttle astern, but there was no success. They were firmly held by the hard-packed sand, 90 million tons of which were washed down the Fly River each year. All they could do was to prop the boat upright with timber props and wait 6 hours for the incoming tide to lift them clear. Fortunately, one of the nationals had a ball in his possession, so a hastily contrived bat enabled them to have a game of cricket on the compressed sand while they waited for nature to provide her solution. On other expeditions on these waterways, Colin had to take precautions against being caught in a Boar Wave. A bore occurs when the leading edge of the incoming tide forms a wave or waves of water against the river's outgoing current. Such waves travel at increasing speed as the funnel-shaped delta narrows and can be dangerous for river shipping. It creates a roaring, rumbling sound that can be heard from a great distance. River-going boats such as the Diari II may surf these waves, but if turned broadside, they will easily be capsized. When these dangers threatened, Colin would sail the Diari II into sheltered waters until the danger had passed, then follow in the wake of the bore. The life of a missionary is always to expect the unexpected, a challenge that has its worries, but also its excitement. Colin thrived on it. The next chapter is called Learning to Fly. While living at Beaulieu, Colin and Melva contacted a person in Brisbane who sent them a large package of old magazines. Among them, much to Colin's delight, were a number of magazines on aviation. While on furlough in 1958, he had been studying Greek, Hebrew, ancient history, and ethics, but these magazines on aviation captured his imagination, so he switched academic pursuits to study for his private and commercial pilot's license by correspondence with Australian Civil Aviation School. In 1961, Colin was appointed district director of the West Papua district based in Oriomo. This huge district involved sailing the Fly River as far as the West Irian border and 10 other rivers, visiting many villages along the banks of the waterways. It was a challenging lifestyle for all members of the family. Melva's life as a mother was made more difficult when baby Neroli, their third daughter, periodically suffered from high fevers, causing them to question whether she might have contracted elephantiasis, a disease transmitted by mosquitoes and flies. Despite these concerns, Colin continued with his aviation studies to the point where he was ready to sit final theory exams for both his private and commercial license. It was arranged that the papers would be flown from Port Moresby to Drau. In those days, the flight was made in a Catalina, which is a flying boat. Colin went by boat to pick them up and spoke to the captain. My name is Winch. I understand you have some exam papers for me? Yes, I do, responded the captain, handing over the envelope containing the exams. These were duly sat under the direction of the district commissioner. 2 weeks later, the family were due to fly home on furlough. When the captain of the Catalina saw the name Winch on the passenger list, he located Colin and invited him to the flight deck once the plane was airborne. At the captain's suggestion, Colin took over the controls and flew the plane almost to Port Moresby. Regardless of the noise of the motors, Colin was both ecstatic and hooked. Prior to leaving on furlough, he had asked Pastor John Keith, president of the Coral Sea Union Mission, for permission to obtain his pilot's license as a furlough assignment while in Australia. The veteran missionary replied, Colin, the Coral Sea Union Mission will never get an aeroplane. On returning to Australia, Colin was not given a furlough assignment, allowing him opportunity to pursue his flying training. This he chose to do at the Wimmera Aero Club in Victoria under the tuition of Dick Hunt. To obtain a private license took 40 hours of flying and 165 hours for a commercial license at the cost of £5 10 shillings per hour, which is a lot of money in those days. Colin was fortunate, however, because Dick Hunt offered the cash-strapped missionary the opportunity to fly him to his various other flying schools at a cost of £2 per hour, a major savings, and an opportunity to accumulate flying hours at a rapid rate. Even more hours of flying were accumulated when a farmer, George Smith, offered Colin the use of his Tiger Moth airplane for the cost of fuel and oil. This was a godsend, and the smiling missionary availed himself of many hours of circuit training and aerobatics out of what is now known as the George Smith Memorial Airstrip at Birchip. In the meantime, no solution had been found to Nerali's worrying health issue. Every 6 weeks, the fevers would return with high temperatures, and questions arose as to the wisdom of returning to the mission field. When the Wimmera Aero Club offered Colin a full-time job as an instructor, after discussions with Melva, Colin decided to accept the position, and he notified Pastor Laurie Naden, division secretary, that they would not be returning to the mission field. But 2 weeks later, on a Sabbath afternoon, Colin and his family were conscience-smitten. They must return to the mission field. To Dick Hunt's great disappointment, but the church's satisfaction, Colin notified Pastor Naden of the decision, but requested that due to Nerali's medical issues, that they be transferred away from Oriomo. Colin was appointed as district director to Maprik in the Sepik district, a mission station at the elevation of 800 feet. Mosquitoes were less of a problem at this elevation. However, Melva remained in the homeland for 3 months while solutions were sought for Nerali's medical issues. On returning to Papua New Guinea in 1963, Colin took up his appointment at Maprik and endeavored to further his experience as a pilot by offering to fly for the Mission Aviation Fellowship on his days off. This offer was declined, but gladly accepted by the Catholic Church, who were flying a Cessna 180 when Colin approached them. Needing to gain flying experience in Papua New Guinea, Colin applied to the Coral Sea Union Mission to fly for Stolair, a small charter airline in central and western Papua, based in Port Moresby. This proved valuable as it gave him experience in flying in New Guinea's uniquely dangerous conditions. About this time, Colin became aware that a fellow missionary, Len Barnard, held a private license and was keen to use planes in the mission work of the church. Both men had spent days tramping muddy, leech-infested swamps, fording rushing streams, laboring up sheer mountainsides, and cutting their way through tropical jungle, while above them, planes would cover distances in minutes that took them days on foot. At that stage, two missionaries had not met, but Colin wrote to Len saying, "I've got a commercial license, you got a private license. Let's buy a plane between us and share it in our work here in the mission field." Largely due to Len Barnard's ability to solicit funds, enough money was raised to buy a new Cessna 180. Action was passed by the appropriate church authorities to use the plane in mission work in New Guinea. While serving at Maprik, Colin and Melva met Quesakein, a crippled but faithful member of the Maprik Sabbath School. Every Sabbath, in sunshine or rain, this 10-year-old girl would leave her home around 7 a.m. and crawl on her hands and legs for 2 hours over rough pathways, crossing 2 mountain streams in order to be at Sabbath school on time, and she was never known to be late. Her smiling face revealed her enjoyment of hearing the King's Herald singing as recorded on an LP record. She happily joined in singing choruses, loved listening to stories, and was particularly intrigued by the colorful pictures on the picture roll. Colin wrote up the story of Quesakein, which was printed on the front page of the Review and Herald, April 9, 1964. This drew a generous financial response from church members around the world, and a suggestion that Quesakein be taken to Sopas Hospital for assessment and treatment by Dr. Yeats. With the plane now a reality, Colin had the privilege of flying her and her father from Maprik to Wabag. Having never been in an airplane, she clung to her father in terror. Such flights fulfilled the dream of two far-sighted missionaries. No longer did they walk the earth with their eyes turned skyward, but they spent happy hours of mission service on land and sea and in the skies.
Be sure to tune in next time for more stories from the book Winchee by S Ross Goldstone, which is available at the Adventist Book Center. And meanwhile, check out these videos and others on my channel, with many more mission stories and Bible skits for kids and adults. God bless you.